From Bishop to Super Pastor is our title today. That one, talk about selling.
Is this like your career aspiration? You want to go from bishop to super pastor?
That's right.
Bishop now.
I want to introduce to all of you two super pastors that I know that have come into the study right now.
Oh, yeah.
And
so that makes you the
I
bishop.
brought in the best. I am the bishop, and you are my super pastor.
I'm the bishop of Festuvia on Presbycast, so you are talking to an actual bishop.
What we want to talk about today is the development a little bit. We're not going through all the history, but the development of what happened in the church to lead us to where we are today. And I think, I always say we're really hard on Rome, rightly so, but evangelicals have to do, and us, we need to think about some kind of spiritual inventory to make sure we haven't fallen into the same traps. And the goal of this, to be positive, as Adam's always wanting to be, is to give you a healthy view of the office bearers God has appointed in your life, who are appointed not with a ruling power, but with a serving power, right? That's really important. We're servants. We are called to be servants. We are called to be those who were sent as gifts by Christ himself for the help of his church, for the upbuilding of the church, not to build the church around us. Okay. And it's a challenge. I always say it's built into all of us to want to be great. To want to write the book that's going to change the world, right? To want to have influence, to want to have popularity, to want to have greatness. The disciples asked about this. I mean, that question in Matthew 18, who's the greatest in the kingdom? You ever thought about that question?
All the time.
It's a dubious question.
Yeah.
Because behind it is about me.
Surely it's one of us.
Surely it's, please, Jesus,
Which
please,
one of us
please.
is it?
Mom wants the great.
Yeah.
My mom told me I'm great.
I love that they sent their mommy to ask for the seat. Like, come on, man.
I'll make you a deal.
Like,
yeah.
Hey, Mom, will you ask Jesus if we can go on the right or left? Yeah. Like, you put your mom up to this? Come on.
But how real?
Depends on your mom. Don't short sell mom.
Hey,
I mean, if Queen Mother
if she
type.
had the Sons of Thunder, maybe she must have been a tough old lady.
That's right. That's right.
It's very earthly. It's very human. Moms always think their son's the best. So, I'm kind of amazed that's there. But yeah, I mean, right before that, what's ironic about that, what's kind of sad about that is Jesus just explained himself going to a cross. And then she asked that.
Yeah.
So there's the contrast. What is greatness? Look at Jesus. He denied himself all the way to the cross. He made himself a servant. And it hasn't always been like that in the history of the church. So what would we do? Let's just say who's the greatest in this room right now. And if it were the choice between Adam or Dan, let's just say Adam came out on top, right?
Let's say the bishop didn't include himself in any of the options. Did you notice that there? He's like, who's the greatest in this? You mean second greatest in this room? Is it Dan or Adam, right? Did you say second?
I did not say second.
Yeah, you did, I think. Roll the tape back, guys, and listen.
I'll take Adam in a cowboy hat as the greatest. With the little string around his neck. That's my favorite part of that photo, the little string around his neck.
So what would we do? What would we do with Adam? So we, if we're following the trajectory of history, we'd say, he's really kind of the best bishop among us. We'll give him a robe. And we'll put a $600,000 ring on his finger that we're supposed to kiss.
Where do I sign? Where do I sign?
Then we'll give him a little mobile.
Yeah. There are worse people to appoint bishop.
A little mobile, like I would say, early 90s. What's it called? That you drive?
The Grand Marquis.
The Grand Marquis.
Vinyl top.
That's it says Pope Adamus the First. So,
that sounds
anyways,
good. I need a driver though. I need a driver too. Yeah.
So this is a sad development that happened in the history of the church.
All right, I'm going to put you on the spot right away because I want to talk about this. So,
please do.
Landscape of all the churches, right? You got like the Orthodox churches, and you got Roman Catholicism. You even got, in the historic Protestant family, you have like the Anglicans, right? So they're all arguing for this biblical, God-ordained form of government where you have the bishop.
Yeah.
And they say, well, that's what happened in the early church. That's how when we start talking about church history, you start with all the popular bishops that established the centers of Christianity, and that's because Christ appointed these autocephalic, these heads.
Yeah.
that have direct authority of Christ, and from them flows, all the underlings that are existing in the church hierarchy.
Yeah.
Versus other forms of church government that we're aware of. But I mean, we should speak to that first.
Yeah, I mean,
like early bishops. What do we think about that? I mean, do we just concede that? Oh well, obviously we don't.
Yeah,
we have an answer to that.
So my reading, you guys jump in. I know you guys have done a lot of reading on this too, but early on, presbuteros and episkopos were used interchangeably.
Right.
Presbuteros had Jewish roots. Episkopos had more Greek roots. So they appealed in different ways, those words, but they were used interchangeably in the early church and in Scripture.
Talk about the nuance of each one.
Yeah. So, in the synagogue worship, were known as presbuteros. They were elders who ran the synagogue worship. And what happened was, in that, you'd have one sort of presbuteros, you'd have one elder who was sort of the chief overseer of synagogue worship. So when the early church formed, when they were organizing and Paul appoints elders in every city, what you saw happen is that this episkopos initially was just the pastor. He was the teaching. He was set apart to teach and to preach in the church. Okay. It's kind of our continental view of why we have a three-office view. Calvin wasn't so. You read Calvin, he said, they would later take more on than what Scripture. I think that's his very language, more than Scripture said. But he would say they were initially just pastors.
Yeah,
they were initially just pastors. You had this structure of now Presbyterians don't like the development of the episcopacy. They think it's a sad development all the way through. Bannerman just crushes it in the Church of Christ. But you had these three offices that really were prevalent in the early church, just as we would understand pastor, deacon, and elder. And then this thing over time begins to become managerial, and it assumes more power. And the bishop then takes all these things to himself that...
Well, let's just say that, so in the early days of the bishop, he's still in a pulpit.
Yeah, he's in a pulpit.
So we would probably call it like the moderator of a presbytery.
Right.
That's the early role of the bishop. It's not a hierarchy.
He's a moderator.
He's the moderator. He's kind of the lowercase l leader of the presbytery, whatever. But he's the key thing is he's still in the pulpit. He is a pastor serving local congregation.
That's key.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then that expands to the more hierarchical power-sucking role of the bishop in the early medieval period.
Another important angle on that is when you have competent and exceptional bishops, pastors, local pastors who are looked to and are gaining influence not just in their local pulpit, but now more regionally because of their exceptional gifts and because they're right on issues, as it turns out, looking back, et cetera. Like they do get appointed by the plurality of elders and by other, what we're calling here bishops, other pastors, to, with greater levels of decision-making power and influence and assignment. So, I mean, that's not any different than what happens today.
It's not.
Even in a local consistory room.
That's right.
You have guys that are around the table, and we say delegate the guy and give him more authority in this part of the plural ministry of the elders to accomplish because he's excellent at it.
And he's been trained.
Yeah. This is why, the big dogs, the Chris Gordons and the Dan Borvans of the world get called to speak at regional conferences and host the podcasts, and the underlings, the rank and file like Adam Kaloostian gets invited in. But we're not saying that there's a difference in the dignity and level of the office.
That's exactly right.
Right? We're just saying that,
right.
Listen to Chris and listen to Dan. I mean, come on, who doesn't want to listen to them more often than me? Right, yeah. So anyway, but this is the idea that it does, just because you do have these very powerful and influential men in the early church exercising a great deal of governing influence does not mean that the infrastructure of their or that the spiritual, that Christ has vested them with any more singular authority than the other groups. This is how we describe the rise of these bishops. So, like, historically, they say you can't deny all the churches look to these bishops, and we say we don't deny that. We're saying that it's derivative authority from the plurality of the spiritual authority that Christ has established.
Yeah, and there's I'm sorry, you want to go?
Well, it's not institutional hierarchy.
Right.
It's an organic looking to some for who had more influence, like you say, but it's not built into the system.
Right. It's analogous to what happened with Rome. I mean, so obviously the system develops, and then you have these equal centers of power. Rome actually does well in a lot of doctrinal and personal disputes, gains also influence for other reasons because of wealth and whatever, political prominence in the region. And then, that could be said as good, but then, comes to its view where it is superior to all of the other spiritual authority, right? They had something legit that they changed into something that wasn't true about their spiritual power.
Right. And what's important about that is, you had heresies in the early church. They're trying to organize, they're trying to consolidate, they're trying to stop people from the heresies, Ignatius and all these things. So you will find statements from Ignatius like, look to your bishop. And that makes some people think that it was much earlier, this abuse. But Ignatius, he was about to die. This is going to be a major blow to the church. So he wants to protect people in that regard. But they never said early on that the bishop was a direct successor of the apostolic office. That started to happen. So then they started saying he becomes the bearer, this is a striking phrase, of all apostolic power. So there's a power grab. So bearer of all apostolic power, they separated the office as a direct successor of the apostolic office. Yeah. And therefore, the hierarchy began, and the presbuteros, the elders, were following, the deacons were farther down on that. And the deacons just became servants of the episkopos. Yeah. And the episkopos, the bishop, managed the treasury. I mean, I would like to manage treasury.
It's a good racket.
But anyways, he manages the treasury, and then he actually takes all ordaining power himself. Think about that. And so then you have the rise of like metropolitans over, like you were saying, these big cities, Antioch. And then shortly after, of course, after these metropolitans, it consolidates in the east. Constantinople's like the new Rome. And then, and by the way, the Bishop of Rome was never the bishop over the whole thing. He was over the West. And so
but it was the only important city in the West.
Rome.
Right.
Rome. So Rome becomes this, it's the imperial city. It's got all this tradition. And he takes that. This is supreme pontiff, the papa, to himself. There you get the origins of the papacy off Matthew 16. And this thing just keeps expanding and growing and growing.
So as it grows, part of the reason why it grows is because the Roman Empire is declining.
That's right.
So politically, the Roman Empire is receding. And at the same time, the Roman religion is ascending because you have to replace. There's a vacuum. The emperor's gone. The emperor went to east. Rome, as the empire is fading, and then is conquered. Well, who do we look to now? There's nothing in the West. Mm-hmm. All the intelligentsia and the power is in the east. The Pope, the Bishop of Rome, is the only guy left in Western Europe. That's why he becomes the central figure.
Yeah, he becomes the central figure. So that by the time you get to, you start having statements made, 600 that are shocking. I think it was Pope Agatho, the church has never erred nor ever will err. What? And then you have like Pope Boniface VIII and his Unum Sanctum, his papal bull, 1302, where he finally says, all salvation is necessary that you be subject to the Roman pontiff,
And that's really the peak of papal power.
That's the peak.
In that medieval period, Boniface. He holds the two swords. He's the one who talks about the two swords. The Pope, of course, has rule in the spiritual realm. Nobody denies that in that era. And also the Pope has the sword of the temporal realm.
That's right.
So he's the boss of everything.
The kings are kissing his
Exactly
ring.
right.
Kings, you go to Fox's Book of Martyr, they're bowing down to the Pope in these images. It's stunning. Jesus never envisioned that kind of power given to men.
And he temporarily allows he allows the stewardship over that temporal sword to the civil magistrate, the civil rulers, but he can take it back whenever he wants. So you, Holy Roman Emperor, who's crowned by the Pope, you don't think that you have free reign. He can take that back.
You were on the committee that wrote an excellent report for Eastern Orthodoxy, and we're seeing a lot of defection of people back to Roman Catholicism, Eastern Orthodoxy, but it's built on that premise in that lie that there lies the apostolic succession.
Yeah.
And it's not just succession of bishops, it's succession of liturgy, as you make the point in that excellent report. People should get that report, by the way. If you're struggling with Eastern Orthodoxy or know people who are, that report you guys wrote is just probably the best.
Yeah, it was about 10 years ago. It was a good starting point. I mean, I often think like we should recommission it, right? Because I think as it was true at the time and generally true of like, I guess, the garden variety historic Protestant. I mean, Orthodoxy is less, like I was just thinking about seminary when I went through, we studied a lot about Roman Catholicism and scholastic theology and Roman Catholicism. And of course, the Reformation happened in the West out of Roman Catholicism directly. It wasn't as much on our radar to read about the Orthodox churches, plural, by the way, and the different sets of Orthodox churches that exist and their distinctives from Roman Catholicism or whatever. So, I mean, in some ways, our little committee was behind the curve and doing some, rehabilitation reading to catch up a little bit to get some talking points together. But yeah, there's more to say about it. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting to think about, depending on which family of Orthodox churches you're talking about. But yeah, the hierarchy is what distinguishes them. And then which particular dogmatic statements they adopt to be fundamental dogma, because they don't all agree about that.
Yeah.
But then also, which liturgies they use, which functions more or less as our confessions do in our churches. But anyway.
Yeah. I think it's a desire for religious certainty.
Absolutely, yes.
And so
just trace the succession from the right bishop, and then you know which church is true, instead of the mess that, in part, the historic Protestantism has come, and the gross abuse of Roman Catholicism has come. Yeah. But people go to the Pope of Rome too for that reason, right? If that's the true church,
religious
in spite
certainty.
of its flaws, I go there. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there were distinctions happening along the way. First, clergy just originally meant lot or inheritance. So then they started radically separating clergy and laity in an unhealthy way. And then what happened is they made a distinction between like the listening church and the teaching church. And all the responsibility of the listening church is to listen and obey. Shut up, listen and obey, and we'll take your money, right? So that like when Leo X gets to the throne just preceding the Reformation, this guy, they say, I don't know if this is factual, maybe Dan, he spent an equivalent of, in 8 years of his papacy, $675 million. Like, this is gross abuse. The office itself was full of gross abuse.
Well, just before him is the Borgia Pope. So Alexander, whatever he is, the 6th or something, he was one of the most wicked men in history. Yeah. So this is the thing with the Vicar of Christ as the Pope of Rome. If you look at the history of the popes, probably 5 out of the worst 10 men in human history have been popes. Yeah. And this is the Vicar of Christ. Are you kidding me?
Top, baby.
Right. Yep. If that's the man of God's choosing, then I'm out of here.
Leo XII. This is what they say. I don't know if it's true. I did look it up, and Chamberlain and his bad popes hinted, at least this was the tradition, that some dude took him out, and they kept it quiet how he died 3 days later after being attacked because the Pope was in bed with his wife. So, I mean, this stuff. I mean, it was a whorehouse.
Well, and Rome admitted that. Everybody, Protestant and Catholic, admitted in the 16th century.
John the 12th. It was John the 12th.
There had to be a moral reform of the church. Mm-hmm. The most strident Roman Catholic allegiance to the Pope in the 16th century recognized we have to moral reform. Now, of course, the Protestants also wanted doctrinal reform.
Right. Worship reform.
Right, all of that. But nobody denied they had serious moral corruption from the top down.
It was a church government issue.
Yeah.
The whole thing needed reformation. So they ripped, I mean, if you summarize what the reform of church government was, they essentially ripped out the authority that had been set up between Christ and his people. Right? This mediatory work. They started, I mean, this is what sacerdotalism was.
Right.
So the rise of all this mediatory, claiming that they're the mediators between God and the people, when Jesus, the Protestant Reformation said, is the only mediator and head of his church. The Reformation ripped all that out. All this abuse of bishops and superpastors.
And it's so bad, prior to the Reformation in the 14th, 15th century, you have the Conciliar movement within the medieval church, which was trying to place the authority in the councils of the church instead of just one man.
Right.
Because their great question was, what do we do with a heretical pope? If the guy at the top goes crazy, can anybody stop him? So this is the rise of the Conciliar movement, trying to put guardrails on the Pope and trying to control him as much as they could. But then that dies, and by the start of the Reformation, start of the 16th century, the Pope is back to massive power again.
So what was recovered, where we're leading this to is to have people think about from bishop, from the episkopos to the super pastor today.
Because somebody's just going to say, okay, that's fine, but so good. Yeah, I'm not going to go to an Orthodox church.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to go to a Roman Catholic church.
Right.
So that's why I'm in my Bible church. Because exactly. And I just have a nice group of guys. I got the guy at the top. And I got a nice group of guys. He's surrounded him that, kind of are his advisors. And so we don't have that problem anymore.
Because this could never happen at Ventura Reformed.
Well,
so Pope Adam,
right,
Adamus the First.
Yeah,
no, we're not that. We're not that. We need to say that. So when the Reformation comes around, I'm amazed at how much attention they gave to speaking of what the role of the pastor is again, and primarily. They're saying recovering of the lost, feeding the strong, ministering the word, shepherding the people, caring for the people again. The bishop is not this regional manager that you don't get to. Think about today, or you can't get to this through the staff to see.
Right.
Right. This guy actually cares about you. This guy actually prays for you. This guy comes into your home and visits you. He's not the untouchable.
He's not the bishop who tours around every few months to all the churches in his see.
Yes, that's
he's
right.
the guy every week in the
parish,
pulpit.
right?
Yes, he's in the parish.
Well, and structurally, he's not given by Christ an independent, visionary governmental authority in the church. This is important.
Right.
Okay, so just structurally,
That's really
right. This is the difference in church government. So you have a local church pastor who has a legitimate office and is granted gifts and authority and a serving authority by Christ. But he's supervised in life and doctrine and answers to, under the authority of Christ, his fellow elders in the church, or the elders in the church, in the local church. And there is a broader connection between the ministry of the pastors and elders in the local church at least on the matters of significance in the local church. There is a connection to the authority of Christ as expressed and established to those elders and pastors in the regional churches of that federation or denomination. So my point, what we call our regional group in our URC churches is the classis, or you in a more Presbyterian system, Presbyterian. And there are what I would describe as secondary differences between those systems, but that isn't the point. We're just contrasting the main difference between what we think of as a bishop system and what we think of as a Reformed or Presbyterian form of church government in the church. But my point is going to be that when you look at those two in contrast, and then you see, like in contemporary Bible churches and non-denominational churches, the pastors, what do they have more in common with of those two options? A lot of times it's the early bishop model.
Of course.
Because basically a guy starts a work, calls the shots, has the final say on what happens.
He writes the doctrinal statement of the church.
Yeah. Now, I'm not saying there's never any adaptation by some people that are appointed even to be elders, if they call it that, in a local church, but it's not the same as like a Presbyterian or Reformed system with broader connectivity and accountability. But anyways, my point is just you see the rise of superstardom, an over-understanding of the power that has been granted a local minister by Christ. Mm-hmm. And this is a very common thing. These are super pastors, big personalities, and a lot of people who want to be big personalities and effective, but can't quite do it like the guys who are successful. And there's plenty of those too. like these little mom and pop shops all over the place that it's just ridiculous. I mean, there's no end of it. It reflects the individualism in our own, Western context and
for the most part, Reformed churches,
sloppy and illegitimate.
Reformed churches did have the parity of ministers, that all ministers were equal in, number one, with the pastors and the elders in the local church, and then as in the regional church with the ministers all being equal, no hierarchy. But we must admit, there were bishops in the Church of England, which was a Reformed church prior to the English Civil War. I'll argue against anyone who says otherwise. They were at the Synod of Dort, a Reformed international synod. So there were bishops in the Church of England, a Reformed church. And also, even today, in the Hungarian Reformed churches, there are bishops. So we're not...
They're a Reformed Episcopal Church, sure.
We're not squeaky clean in our parity of ministers. But for the most part, our polity does believe in the parity of ministers, that all ministers are equal. We go to our regional meetings. Nobody lords over the meeting. Each minister there gets one vote. There's not a hierarchy. Now, there is de facto hierarchy, like you said, where... Even in Reformed churches, let's be honest, we do have men with more influence who become something of super pastors. Sure. Even in Reformed circles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean,
but a lot of times it's because they're competent, they're exceptional, they're assigned, they're given us more assignments to execute the will of the plurality, as I'm saying it, because they're gifted in that way. There's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
Now, okay. We also abuse it. I mean, if that's what you're trying to say. Some guy takes more power, authority himself than he should. Fine. Of course, that happens. But we're talking about the structure itself.
Right. And I think it is natural, even within our polity, where there is no hierarchy, even within our classis meetings, we do see those men who have more influence, more activity in the classes. That's okay. I was just in the Midwest at the Orthodox Presbyterian Church in the Midwest, and I was under care of that presbytery 15 years ago. And I remember going to the presbytery meetings, and this was at a time when the presbytery of the Midwest was huge. There were 30-something churches. It was massive. So you had dozens and dozens of ministers, elders, and in these meetings, probably about 5 guys would talk. The guys with the gray hair who'd been there forever, they ran the meetings, and not in a domineering way. They just knew what they were doing. These were fantastic churchmen who knew how to run a presbytery meeting. And all the guys, under 50 just sat and observed. And it wasn't like they were silenced, and there were times when they did offer input. But for the most part, you had to earn your way to that level of influence. To me, that's perfectly appropriate. These men were respected, and they were worthy of that influence, and they exercised it judiciously and appropriately. Again, not lording over, but in an appropriate way. So
and they still only got one vote,
exactly.
Right? So if
there's no institutional hierarchy.
Deferring to their leadership, it doesn't mean that you don't vote conscientiously about what's being debated, and you don't consider the arguments that are being presented.
Right.
So that's healthy, and that's all normal. I'm just saying that the trend that I see is just very powerful. Men, yes, not just men and women, overestimating, misdefining the nature of their spiritual authority and just running with it.
Yeah, I mean, the big, you come to Luther, who responded pastorally to the bishop abuse of Rome. And, he just comes along and he says, I have this quote in my head, "Woe to you forever, bishops. How will you escape who've so woefully neglected your office? You don't teach, the people know no Christian teaching." I think of our day. They don't know the Lord's Prayer. They don't know the Creed. They don't know the 10 Commandments, and nor any part of the Word of God. So the heart of what the Reformation and Calvin would bemoan the same was to, again, call the bishops or the pastors back to the great responsibility to teach and preach the Word of God to the people, right? And I think in this model of what we see today is why it becomes what you're bemoaning in the small moms and pop churches is because he's become the giant it's become a managerial office over the whole thing.
Yeah.
And so he's dominated. He's in control of the treasury. He's in control of where the money goes. The deacons are his servants. Everyone bows down to him. And in that whole model, what gets secondarily pushed to the side is the heart of his calling to be a servant in ministering the word. And even in the ministry of the word today, it's funny. Why is it, this is the question for us, when we think about from bishops to super pastors, why do people find such a hard problem with ecclesiology? I think you guys all know this problem, especially Southern California. You can go to soteriology, you can look at all the theology propers, but when it comes to ecclesiology, when it comes to the doctrine of the church, when it comes to church governance, most people don't value this, or it's the last hurdle for them to get over. So, you'll hear complaints. Well, in my church, the preaching's bad. We sing heresy. We have bad music. We don't know where the money goes. We got all these problems in the church. And these people stay there. When you look at a Reformed church, and they wouldn't darken the door of a Reformed church because they're somewhat intimidated of a formal ecclesiastical structure to the church. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah. Well, so okay. So you're saying neglect of pastoral care leads to the office of the super pastor. Yeah, I'm saying too, resistance of just the biblical structure of church government.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just you can't just appoint yourself to be a pastor. You can't just do that. Nice guy, you have a vision. You want people to come to Christ. Great. Like let's assume that that's really what is in your heart.
Yeah,
but the church has to examine, train, ordain, and send you. This is, and you exercise your ministry under the authority of the local elders in the church and broadly connected to at least the regional spiritual authorities that are part of the federation to which you belong or denomination to which you belong. And that's a biblical structure. But that is completely glossed over.
It is.
Yeah. And so you have everybody doing their own thing according to their own way. And a lot of the thing that happens in SoCal is, okay, this person has a Calvinist soteriology, as you mentioned. That person may have come to a covenantal view of, understanding the Old Testament and then understanding the sacraments in the church. So they institute that. And then, okay, so keep going. Like, what about some of these fundamental structures about how a church, is established and the authority? Not there. Mm-hmm. And they just continue on and, to have to say, well, let me go get credentialed. Let me go get legitimate. Let me explore like an historic Protestant denomination and submit to its leadership that Christ has established. And maybe, like, if I am called to the ministry and these people that are following me, listening to me, maybe we'll come in to one of them where it fits. Yeah, that's a process that more people should be going through. But we don't see that. Why? Because my brand.
Yes, right.
Right. My influence, my popularity, it's a different form of the same thing that you see with super bishops.
Mm-hmm. So what is it? Why do they not want to come in? Why, like you said, churches that would adopt Calvinistic soteriology, maybe even aspects of covenant theology, why is church government the last barrier for some of these guys?
Yeah, well, I mean, you're going to impugn motives, right? I mean, best case scenario, ignorance. They just don't know.
That's best case.
Best case. But a lot of people are just raised that this is the system they're raised as a part of, the broader evangelical independentism type situation, and they just do it, and they're genuine people who want to serve the Lord and whatever. But that's best case. You can go to the other extreme, which is that they're self-serving people who are looking out for their own kingdom, and they're so arrogant they don't need accountability and whatever. I mean, it could be anything in between these two. Also, you have people who could be predators that do this stuff. Well, I mean, you have predators in the legitimate system too. But I'm just saying,
this question.
These could be reasons why people set up their shop independently and do their thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think
some people shouldn't be in the public ministry, period, because they're not gifted and called to it, and because we set such a low bar. And believe me, I don't have a high view of like I've achieved this high bar, but I'm just saying, that's also a thing.
Right.
Like some people need to know their responsibility, and sorry, you're just not called to be a minister.
Okay, but I think this is what I want to post to you guys. It was Carl Truman years ago. He was on a panel, and he tells a story when he was at Westminster, of asking the students, who's your coming into trained for ministry. Who's your favorite pastor? None of them said their local pastor. so,
that question was posed to me when I was in England many years ago. A pastor friend there said, "Who are your favorite preachers?" I said, "Guys you've never heard of."
Yeah, exactly. So we're trained to think, in evangelicalism, and this is where I think Truman, gave the designation Big Eva, which stuck, right? Conference circuits, big platform circuits, big name figures, the big platforms. These have captured the heart of the people, so that they think that's where the most important thing is happening, and that's who I need to look to as my bishop, right? So I need to listen to them, and so there's a downplaying of the role of the servant slugging it out every week, who has no glory, has no name, who works hard, will come visit you in your home when your spouse dies, who will bury your loved one, as he's commissioned to do, who will catechize your youth, which is one of our none of those things are ever considered as valuable.
Right.
Right? It's this stuff that's considered valuable. Now compound the problem with his piece, if you agree with it, that Big Eva's dying. We're moving to Gig Eva, where you've got the internet personalities who are all attacking Gig Eva and rehabilitating Hitler on the other end. So they're drawing away thousands after themselves, right? And again, who takes the hit? The local church.
Yeah.
Every single time in these things. So I think that has a factor in our American celebrity culture. That factor has been long at play, and it's so built into the consciousness of the people that nothing of real value is happening anymore at the local church from a no-name pastor who's slugging it out every week. I think that's a big factor.
The super pastor is not going to hold your hand while you're dying,
right,
and prepare you for death. And the Gig Eva guy who's fighting the culture war, isn't going to do those things.
Blowtorching things.
Yeah, when he can't come visit you in the hospital because he's got his blowtorch duty.
Yeah.
Over time, I'm a little less, the conferences and the successful public speaking pastors that get a wider audience. I mean, sometimes it's because they're exceptionally gifted.
Yeah.
And they can and should have a great influence and a wide hearing, a leading light in that sense. And
we're not throwing it out.
But I'm going somewhere with it too. But if people want to, they have a desire for more, deeper reflection on the Word of God or on particular topics and more expertise than, say, your particular local pastor might or might not have or whatever, fine. My issue is that, the guys that are those guys, I want to see them express a biblical ecclesiology, number one. So this is an issue that I have, because some of the guys who are popular on even Reformed, at least Reformed adjacent speaking circuits, do not have a Reformed ecclesiology.
Right.
They're part of independent churches. They're part of the. I don't like that.
Even ones who are part of Reformed churches. Are they churchmen?
Are
they churchmen in those churches? Are they serving on committees?
Sure.
In those churches, are they doing pastoral ministry?
Right, and
in their Reformed church that has called them.
Okay, yeah. Like I know one of the talking points at our beloved alma mater is that they want professors at seminary who have served as pastors in the ministry, right, in the local church. So
pastors, I think that's training pastors.
Yeah, because they care about the local church. So I mean, I also want the conferences and the conference speakers to talk about this more.
Yes, right.
To tell because the thing is, if you have guys who are speaking who don't have a Reformed ecclesiology, that's bad. Because what's the point? When you put a speaker up, you want the people to learn from and imitate this person's life and doctrine.
Right.
So it's kind of weird to me.
It's a really important point.
That we're not just talking about. So of course we're not all going to agree on everything. That's not my point. But my point is, like, something as fundamental as, like, following Jesus Christ means that you belong as a member in a local church, and then you inevitably ask, well, okay, what are the three marks of a legitimate local church? Not that there aren't other Christians in all kinds of churches or whatever. What we're defining as a place where I should go, where I know that that's where Christ will feed me and that I can identify as a church legitimate in that sense. Great. So the guys you're putting forward not only should be in churches like that, but they should also be teaching the people at the conferences. Not necessarily you say this every time, everything, but this should be a regular part of the parachurch groups that put on conferences.
They should serve the local church.
That should serve the local church. And not just say, we serve the local church. It's like, no. Tell the people to go to the historic Protestant churches that bear this way. This is my concern, and that when we don't do that, it kind of feeds that culture of the superstardom circuit, Yeah. But again, look, a lot of the churches partner in putting on conferences, and they put their best preachers and public speakers, pastors on, and that's fantastic. I think those guys do a lot of great work,
Yeah, no, I think that's right. We need to have a positive view at these. These conferences should be a gateway into the local church.
Yes,
that's what they should be, and I 100% agree with that. And I think there are outfits out there doing a really good job with that. Anyways, what I want to think about though for the modern super pastor is the sort of pronouncement model we're getting. You get bishops like Mark Driscoll. You get guys like this who are online, who have been abusive in their local churches, who are now acting like super bishops online, making pronouncements. And
he calls himself a pastor to pastors. That's a bishop.
As if it's ex cathedra pronouncements. And I think what people need to be aware of is, listen, pronouncements, authoritative proclamations, this sort of dominance over the people is never separated from the oversight of elders. We've lost that today. Even when John MacArthur, is with the Lord now, but I mean, when he made the pronouncements to Newsom on COVID, it should have been his elders. And everyone was all gung-ho on how tough and great John MacArthur was. John MacArthur's not a pope, right? John MacArthur is subject to elders, and we want to communicate that. I'm not doing my own thing disconnected from the church. Even this is overseen by elders. That's really important for the checks and balances on those who are more gifted today and, who have these platforms that way. Mm-hmm. I think that's important. I think that's really important today.
Yeah, but a super pastor is not going to surround himself with elders who tell him no.
Yeah, or yes men.
Exactly.
Or yes men.
That's what Driscoll had in Mars Hill until he set fire to the place and then left the smoldering rubble. Mm-hmm. We need elders. Every pastor needs elders who will tell him no and care for his soul by preventing him from doing certain things and having a certain level of influence that would not be productive for him or helpful for him. It would be a temptation for him.
I think the big thing to close this out is to remember that we're servants. This is where we started. The Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and give his life a ransom for many. Our ministries cannot fundamentally look different in the sense that we are called to get dirty in serving people. So again, it's a serving power. And what's the object of a serving power? It's to give people the Savior, not ourselves. I think that's so crucial for this discussion.
And there's a structure in place that Jesus gave his church to promote that and to protect that. It's kind of, you're a good-hearted guy who wants to serve the Lord in the ministry. Just go fit into the structure that he established for you to guard you and to support and encourage you.
Yeah.
And if when you're in that structure, be a true churchman and operate courageously within that structure, because we have presbyterial form of church government, which I think is biblical. But if we don't have courageous men willing to enforce that form of government when necessary, it doesn't prevent error and calamity from abusive men within that system.
Yeah.
We can have the best form of government, but it takes men to stand courageously, even against their friends in the presbytery or classes sometimes, and to bring charges and to prosecute men who have fallen into serious error. It takes courage. And no form of government will prevent abuses without men with chests, as C.S. Lewis said.
Yeah, I mean, when Jesus taught his disciples, they fought against, they were pursuing their own greatness, and Jesus rooted that all out. The scribes and Pharisees love to sit in Moses' seat. Don't let anyone call you Papa. So, anyways, it's a good subject we want people to think about. There is a government that God put in place for your good. That's the point. Like, there's a faithful pastor out there who, when Jesus called after the question on greatness, he calls a little child up in front. And he says, this is greatness. This is greatness. So we want to encourage people, look to the little ones in your life. The pastors who don't have always the great names, but who are faithfully and effectively ministering the word, shepherding you, caring for you, and visiting you and praying for you. That's greatness. That's greatness, right? Thanks.
And if you're sitting under a great independent guy, encourage him to get his ecclesiology right, you know?
Right.
Dot that last I and cross that T, and find himself in an historic Protestant denomination or federation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good thoughts. Thanks, brothers.